You've got this book, Christmas, coming out, and you've got another book coming out, haven't you? So have you sort of now changed to being more of a writer and more of a historical writer?
Yes, I think so. It's I don't enjoy writing. Nobody enjoys writing unless they're fluent, and I'm totally unfluent. Every word is carved out of the living rock. But I enjoy having written. I enjoy a thing once it's finished. And I enjoy doing long books. This Christmas one is a very short one, but my big book is a long book, and it's taken me 5 years, 3 months, 2 days, and an hour and 25 minutes. And after working for nearly 30 years, writing little short things, it's great fun to tackle a huge thing.
What is it, though? Because I thought you described it to me as...
It's lovely. It's inexpensive, and it's a kind of... well, the subtitle is an irreverent social history of almost everything.
So it's history through hate, is what you also described it as to me. That's wrong.
Well, it's not really hate. It's just that I illustrate my view of social history with lots of quotations from people who were alive at the time and didn't like what was going on. So all the pieces are critical or show displeasure, which is very. First of all, it's amusing, and secondly, it's very revealing.
What sort of thing? Give me an example, just as a taste for your book.
Well, your quotation is in the religious chapter, and I haven't got round to it yet.
What, that quotation?
Yes, the skeptic's prayer.
Prayer, really? Yes.
O Lord, if there is a Lord.
Yes. But
well, it's like Tchaikovsky saying of Brahms, I heard Brahms' symphony last night, giftless bastard. Well, I think it's terribly interesting because he wasn't giftless, and it's a very beautiful symphony. But why Tchaikovsky took that attitude is terribly interesting. And the fact that music, particularly music, really sends people screaming mad when they're played things they don't like.
do you think that it shows, you see, prejudice, for instance, or hate or dislike or whatever? Perhaps not dislike, prejudice, which is a much more sort of violent feeling anyway, isn't it? Do you think it shows more about the person than anything else?
Dr. Johnson said that no man is a hypocrite in his pleasures. And really I think that no man is possibly not a hypocrite in his displeasures too. And certainly displeasures, what infuriates people is very illuminating.
Do you think that comedy is based on prejudice and on hate rather than on love and on happiness?
Some of it. Quite a lot of comedy, real comedy, is based on fear and displeasure, and it's a kind of compensation for it. If you're prejudiced against coloured immigrants because you feel they're going to take your jobs or your rent's going to go down and you're going to lose money, and you're worried, you can either make a joke, an anti-Pakistani joke, or you can hit him. You see, and it's better to make the jokes. W.H. Auden said that when language fails, then violence comes in.
Yes.
I shouldn't get too worried about prejudice. You know, you can't cross a room without being prejudiced.
No, you're absolutely right.
You know, it's not necessarily bad. In fact, it's part of all of us.
I think it's the one thing that people are extremely unwilling to admit to, though.
Prejudice.
On the whole, don't you think so?
Well, you must be prejudiced. It's prejudging. In other words, it's striking an attitude on something, which, because you've been told something but haven't experienced it yourself. Well, the whole bringing up of children is prejudicing them against crossing the road without looking and things, you see, which, if they found out for themselves, they wouldn't survive.
Have you been a very prejudiced father bringing up your children, do you think?
Oh, I don't know. You have to ask them that. I have no idea. I'm a bit soft. You know, I found actually language failing me on two occasions. One was when I'd mowed the lawn, and I saw my son, he's quite tiny, standing on the edge of the lawn and pulling it up like a carpet and dumping it. And the other time was when I was polishing the car this side, and he was at the other side with his hand in a tin of grease, greasing the other side. And words failed me, and I just said, you thingy, because it was hopeless swearing. There weren't strong enough words to, so one goes back to the simple one.
When you were script writing with Dennis Norton, sorry, because I laughed, I suddenly thought of script writing and then your comedy things. Did you find that you had to get on in a way that was like this, that if you thought of a joke, and there was Dennis Norton sitting opposite you, he had to respond to it for you to be able to go on with it?
Oh yes, it was a terribly close working arrangement we had, the way we worked. And we used to talk in a kind of shorthand. We knew exactly how the other one was thinking. And it used to be, several people used to tell us that when they were in the room and we were working, it was most odd, because Dennis would say, how about, and I say, no. What if we, no, I don't think so.
But you
because we understood that the way his mind always worked next in that way.
But you were making a point to me about the fact that people, when they ask you what a boring question it is, you say, what is comedy? And you say it's impossible to actually even illustrate a joke, because a joke is only, in its right setting, a joke. So isn't that true about, say, an audience, that the joke is directly to do with how they're going to respond to it?
Yes, comedy is what makes you laugh. That's about the notes you can get in the way of definition. But it does need an atmosphere before it becomes funny. But if you ask me now to tell you a funny joke, it'd be terribly difficult to think of one which would suit this particular. But if we were having a drink afterwards, and we'd lived through a half hour, survived, and were feeling lovely, jokes would come tumbling out because the atmosphere would be right for it. So
back to you as a scriptwriter, you see, so that when you became how did you become a scriptwriter, or how does anyone become?
Fate. It was, I'd always wanted to write and always written ever since I could hold a pencil. Lovely stories about deathbed repentances and things one writes when one's very young, very dreary stuff. And I started doing the war, exactly the same as Dennis started, because we found that if we said we were writing for the concert party, we got out of guard duties. And then I had to go professionally, as did Dennis after the war, and we came together by accident, by serendipity. And we worked together for 17 years, absolutely everything, right across the desk.
Now, since, though, you've given up script writing, which you have, haven't you, very largely?
Oh, 10 years.
Yes, and you're writing books mostly, right? But you're also now become more of a performer, haven't you?
Ah, that pays the rent.
So that gets you going on your books, yes.
Yeah, this sort of thing, you see, is terribly helpful.
But you know...
I do get paid.
You do get paid, of course you get paid. But you know, as a performer, you see, you said...
I'm not really a performer. I just sort of... people point the body into a chair like this, and
you do more than that. On the radio, you're a performer, aren't you? You're willing to...
A bit.
Yes. Well, now, you've said, or cuttings have said, that you have always been a painfully shy person, yes? So are you?
Yes.
Have you become a performer, rather like, say, Nye Bevan became an orator because he was overcoming his stammer? You know, that's this business, that the shyer you are, sometimes you force yourself to do things that...
Yes, this is I think quite true, because when you can hold an audience, and particularly if you make an audience titter, it is a tremendous feeling of strength and power. And for a shy person, it's kind of drug. You know, it's once you do that, you exist, and you prove to yourself that you're able to do something. It's why a lot of people become comedians.
What, because of covering up there?
Yeah, why lots of people become writers, because they can't, they have lots of things to say, but they find they can't charm or outwit people when they're talking to them in conversation, but they can put it down when they're alone at a table with pen and pencil.
Have you admitted, or have I just made a rather rambling question out of what I was talking about?
It's a rambling answer, isn't it?
No, it wasn't.
In keeping with the rest.
Have you actually answered whether you are shy? Shy, very shy, or painfully shy, would you call yourself?
Oh, just sort of annoyingly shy for everybody else. I'm afraid of people I don't know, and I don't like going to parties, because the trouble is that I either perform, in other words, go into overdrive, and the laughs and things, or I'm my dreary self and lean up against the wallpaper and wish everybody would go away.
Who were you before you were famous?
Exactly the same, only about an inch taller and straight as a wand.
Well, tell me about your background then. Tell me where you were born, which I don't know.
I was born in Ramsgate, Kent. I went to school, the same school as Mr. Heath, at a different time though.
Yes.
We just didn't overlap. I rather think he might be a couple of years older. I'm 55, so went to school at there. My family moved up to London when I was 11. I went to school at Leighton County High School for Boys, super pre-war secondary school education. My father died just before I was 15, so I left school and went to work for a carbon paper firm called Catabonum. And then came the war, and 6 years leading air craftsman with a white flash getting progressively greyer in my hat, because I was UT air crew but never got trained. Bit of parachuting. Started trying to write professionally after the war. See, in a terrible way, the war, for those of us who were lucky enough to survive, was marvellous, because it cut us away, cut the umbilical cords which were keeping us to a background and to a sort of career, stirred us up and left us when the tide went out on the beach, able to make a new start in any direction.
It's something which ought to come back in a funny way, not the war, but I mean, conscription was very handy, wasn't it, for people to actually say, I must go somewhere else.
Yes, it might well have been.
And I must find out about myself, aside from school and everything else, you know. There isn't an equivalent at
You
the
could do
minute.
it at university, I suppose.
but then-
Almost everybody seems to go to university nowadays.
Well, they don't, do they, in matter of fact. But, I mean, that is the same convenience that some people can find of saying goodbye to home and saying goodbye to what they...
Did you go to university?
I went to university, yes.
Did
and
you
failed
enjoy
my
it?
degree, which I've already admitted once before on the air.
Oh, did you? That's lovely.
I have to say it for some reason. So you didn't go to university,
No,
though, did you?
no.
And do you regret that?
I don't regret it, no, but I think I'd like to go now, except I couldn't keep up with it. But I'd very much like to. I doubt whether I could, though.
You know, when you said you went to secondary school, it means you didn't even get scholarship to a grammar school, do you mean?
No.
So were you not a bright boy at all at school?
Bit of a slob, I'd say, really. I worked, though, and so I came in the first 5, usually, merely because I had application. But I wasn't bright. Dennis was very bright at school, and sort of noted for it, but I wasn't.
You haven't got a chip on your shoulder about that, though, have you?
What about being?
About not having been educated?
Not
or
a bit of it, no. In fact, what I'm doing now is trying to pass on the fun things that I've found out, merely because I've done my reading on my own accord and not read set books given by a tutor. I think this has been of great help to me.
Did you have a sort of very secure home life then?
Tremendously secure,
Yeah.
yes. Tremendously. Poor, but secure.
Yeah. Well, tell me more about that then. I mean, what way was it secure? Just that your parents loved you all?
Yes, my parents loved each other, and they loved my brother and I. And so I grew up taking it for granted, prejudiced, that marriages were happy and worked and were marvellous, and childhood was marvellous. And as I say, it was the Depression, and we were pretty poor. So money isn't the answer. So when I married, it was no question about it wasn't forever, not at all.
No. But you just, I mean, that's why you married, which was because it was going to be forever,
Oh, yes,
you say.
yes.
Yes. Do you think this always follows, that if you've got a fairly happy family life as a child, you then become probably able to have a next family life that's going to be happy too?
Well, I think that your chances are slightly better of achieving it because your attitude is that it's going to work. You don't query that it won't. So you go into it and sort of accepting that it's going to work.
Do you think you've changed much since you were young? I know you said you were an
My
inch
wife's
taller.
changed me a lot for the better.
Yes. Because when did you get married then, Frank?
When I was 29, so that would be 1949.
And in what ways has she changed you? I mean, what sort of...
Civilised me quite a lot.
Well, what were you like at 29 then? Because you now seem to me to be very civilised. You say you've only changed that you've gone an inch taller. So what were you
I'm
like?
shorter I've grown.
I see.
You do. Well, I was even more selfish then than I am now, and very egotistical.
Were you?
And egoistical. Well, yeah, I think it sort of goes with the sort of things I do, you know, it's a kind of self-expression one does. I think people like me are a bit awful. And my wife was frightfully good at coping with that side. And
Do you mean she's made you less awful, or she's
made me
coped with
less
you being awful?
both. She coped with the awfulness and got rid of some of it.
So in that case, I mean, do you mean that you've got a sort of working thing with your wife where you are able to be selfish, but she looks after that, or is she now getting you to become less selfish because you love her and you want to please her, or what?
Yes. Well, it's all sort of rolling along quite nicely, and I think she's rubbed off quite a few corners most successfully. But I think there's a little bit of nastiness left.
You know, you're obviously straightforward about talking about yourself. You know.
Well, I didn't realise I was, but I
you
am
seem
at the
to
moment.
be, right. Are you interested in who you are? You know, like some
Yeah.
people are very. And are you interested in finding out more of your potential?
Not interested at all in self. It's awfully dangerous. I always feel that it might probe and my finger might come out the other side. You know, oh dear, is that what I am? How awful. But I'm interested in finding out what I can write and how well I can write, and really sort of not trying everything. I think one tends to as you get older. And Dennis and I found we could do jokes, so we wrote joke shows. We then wanted to see whether we could write stories, situations, and we wrote stories and situations. And then we tried a different non-fiction comedy, and we did that. You know, and then there's no more sort of comedy we could do. So Dennis wanted to write films, and I wanted to write books. So we gradually sort of keep moving all the time.
Where will you move on to now, then, I wonder?
Well, I've got, if my big book works, I've got another 2 or 3 volumes. I've got the research, which will take me about 12 years. And I've got a book to do for the Oxford University Press, which is about 2 years. So I'm up to about 68 to 70 on the big books. And I'll come back then and reassess the position.
And will you be writing an autobiography any time, I wonder?
No, it'll be a very slim
you never
volume.
will. Well, thank you very much indeed. And I'll say thank you to the people at home. Bye-bye for now.